Welcome back to our Life Group Bible study on the book of Genesis. Tonight we're going to be in chapter 21. So if you don't already have your Bibles open, go ahead and open them up now and turn to chapter 21. And we got a lot to cover in this chapter. So we're going to dive right in. We're going to finally see the birth of Isaac, the promised son to Abraham and Sarah. So let's look at verse 1. The Lord kept his word and did for Sarah exactly what he had promised. She became pregnant and she gave birth to a son for Abraham in his old age. This happened at just the time God had said it would. And Abraham named their son Isaac. 8 days after Isaac was born, Abraham circumcised him as God had commanded. Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born. And Sarah declared, God has brought me laughter. All who hear about this will laugh with me. Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse a baby? Yet I have given Abraham a son in his old age. Obviously, Sarah here is ecstatic. She's so thankful that she's actually had this blessing of having a kid. There was such a stigma on women, especially in this generation, but even really today. Like if they were not able to have kids, it was seen as a blight, as something was wrong with them. And so, especially in this age and time, that was a shameful thing for Sarah. So now that she has given birth, even while Abraham is extremely old, 100 years old, it shows that she does have this value and that she is capable and there's not something wrong with her. And so she is overjoyed. The first point I want to pull from this is point number 1. The Lord always keeps his promises. The Lord always keeps his promises. And I like how the Bible states this so clearly in the first couple of sentences in the chapter. The Lord kept his word and did for Sarah exactly what he had promised. And it's interesting. I recently, or fairly recently, I've taken my boy swimming. He's 3.5 years old now. But when I first started taking him swimming at age 2, we would get the big floaties on him, the thing that would come across the chest and on the arms. You know, we were heavy duty here. He was not going to have any issues in the water. And we would play and splash, and he loved it. Well, I also wanted him to get brave about jumping in the pool and into my arms. And so I would have him come up to the ledge of the pool. I'd be like, all right, Rivers, jump in Daddy's arms. And he would be so hesitant. He kind of wanted to, but he wasn't ready to do that. That was too scary. And I would have to reach forward, grab his arms, like, come on, buddy, come on. And I would have to pull him into the water. And then once he was in the water splashing around, he loved it. And so I'd get him up there again and be like, all right, come on, come on. Now he's done it one time with me and I did it. So this time he kind of grabbed my arms and kind of did a slow motion trust fall into my arms. And we're splashing around again. Next time he gets up there. This time he's getting a little bit more brave. And so this time he kind of hesitates, but then jumps into my arms and he's just loving it. And 15 minutes later, he's getting up out of the pool, running across. I barely have time to turn around before he's jumping in my arms because he knows Daddy's going to catch him. I've caught him every time. I always catch him, and he knows that, and so he's free to just jump off there. What's interesting when you talk about, the Christian walk, it seems like we never get to that point where we're just willing to jump off at a moment's hesitation, even though we serve a completely faithful God. He comes through 100% of the time. He always fulfills his promises. So his promises to be there when we need him, to get us through the tough times, to give us peace and joy even in times of trouble, that we always have heaven and an eternity to look forward with him. All these promises, they should reassure us, but I think even the best of us, at best, when it gets rough, we're doing a slow motion trust fall into his arms. It's just there's hesitance there whether we really think he's going to get us this time, because our circumstances seem so dire, seem so difficult. We just don't know God's going to come through, but he always does. And what I love is we get to see Abraham's faith in these next couple of chapters and show that he trusts God, and it's a great example for us. But let's keep reading now, verse 8. When Isaac grew up and was about to be weaned, Abraham prepared a huge feast to celebrate the occasion. But Sarah saw Ishmael, the son of Abraham, and her Egyptian servant Hagar making fun of her son Isaac. So she turned to Abraham and demanded, "Get rid of that slave woman and her son. He is not going to share the inheritance with my son Isaac. I won't have it." This upset Abraham very much because Ishmael was his son. But God told Abraham, "Do not be upset over the boy and your servant. Do whatever Sarah tells you, for Isaac is the son through whom your descendants will be counted. But I will also make a nation of the descendants of Hagar's son, because he is your son too. So Abraham got up early the next morning, prepared food in a container of water, and strapped it on Hagar's shoulders. Then he sent her away with their son, and she wandered aimlessly in the wilderness of Beersheba. This is a difficult situation here. This brings up my second point, which is this. Blending families is difficult, but nothing is impossible for God. Blending families is difficult, but nothing is impossible for God. Let's state the facts here. First of all, Sarah is dead wrong for this. She's wrong for the way she acted and the way she handled this. She's the one that gave Hagar to Abraham. She is just as much to blame for the problems in their marriage as a result of having Hagar in the mix and Ishmael as the son. And for her to take this slight of Ishmael, an older child, making fun of the younger child, I mean, what family does that not happen? For her to take something that small and to blow it up and kick her out of the home, she's dead wrong for that. But Abraham has to deal with the facts, and the facts are he has a very unhappy wife, and that is the wife of his youth. That is the wife that he's supposed to be with. He was not supposed to do what he did with Hagar, and so God tells him, deal with the circumstance that you're dealt with here. You need to protect this family unit. Isaac is the child of the promise. I'll take care of Hagar, but you're going to have to let him go here. And frankly, these kind of issues come up all the time in blended families. You see other Old Testament examples of the trials of a blended family. You have clearly Jacob and his two wives and his two concubines, and all the squabbles and inner fighting and the pain and sorrow that has resulted of that blended family. And then King David is another great example. I mean, basically all the sorrow of his later years is due to poor parenting on his part and blending families and having so many trouble with his kids. And so it is a very tough thing to do, to blend family. There's so many issues at stake. First, you have to deal with exes, all right? And exes are never fun to deal with. And then, even if you possibly have a decent relationship with your ex, you have to worry about how your spouse thinks about your ex and how she feels or he feels about you interacting with that ex. That's always difficult. And then you have kids that you're trying to blend into family, and you have to blend parenting styles and discipline styles, and you have to come together on that. And then you're dealing with the fact that kids were disciplined differently before you guys came together and made group decisions. And then you have this almost impossible task of catching your love up for this new kid or these new children that are in your home, to love them just as much as you love your own child who you raised from birth and is your flesh and blood. And then you have just these worries about showing favoritism or being too hard on one child or another. Then you have in-laws. Don't even get me started. The in-laws are coming into the mix. You have multiple sets of in-laws. It just goes on and on. Blending families is extremely difficult, and there's all kinds of issues, but nothing is impossible for God. You just have to pull on the Lord's strength. And with the Holy Spirit's power, we can blend families extremely well. If you can pull on the Holy Spirit and use the gifts and the fruits of the Spirit, gentleness, kindness, self-control, peace, patience, all these different things, if you're able to pull from that and act in that way and actually be like Jesus and your parenting style, then you can blend families well and successfully, and it can be a beautiful thing, and it can be a very strong, awesome testimony for God. And if you think about it, really all of us are part of a blended family, especially if you're not from the Jewish community. We're not the children of the promise. We are Gentiles, and we were grafted in, we were adopted in and blended in, and Jesus allowed us to be part of his church. And I'm thankful that Jesus is a good father, and we have a good heavenly Father that was willing to bring us together and provide unity. And Jesus points out that he wants us to be one with him like he is one with the Father, and the Father wants us to be one with him just like he is one with his Son. And so it is possible to blend things well and provide an awesome testimony, but it is difficult. All right, but let's keep reading now. We're going to see what happens with Hagar and Ishmael, starting with verse 15. When the water was gone, she put the boy in the shade of a bush. Then she went and sat down by herself about 100 yards away. I don't want to watch the boy die, she said, as she burst into tears. But God heard the boy crying, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven. Hagar, what's wrong? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Go to him and comfort him, for I will make a great nation from his descendants." Then God opened Hagar's eyes, and she saw a well full of water. She quickly filled her water container and gave the boy a drink. And God was with the boy as he grew up in the wilderness. He became a skillful archer, and he settled in the wilderness of Paran. His mother arranged for him to marry a woman from the land of Egypt. All right, this brings up my third point to share with you. It's this. Satan tries to keep our head down, focusing on our problems, while God is trying to open our eyes to the oasis on the horizon. Satan tries to keep our head down, focusing on our problems, while God is trying to open our eyes to the oasis on the horizon. This is what Satan does. This is his MO. He tries to turn our focus inward and down, away from the Father, away from out there and the possibilities and all the dreams and aspirations we should have being a child of God. He wants to keep our focus down and primarily on ourselves and our own pain. And this is what Hagar does. She looks down and she's so miserable and heartbroken, and she's just given up, and she's leaving the boy over to die, and she's just planning on dying herself, and she is completely given up here. And yet there is just on the horizon, there is no oasis where she can be refreshed and refilled, and there's hope. She just can't see it because her head is down. And I think we do this all the time, and as a result make poor choices. And one of those poor choices is the obvious one of suicide. I've had a lot of experience with people committing suicide, whether in my school or in my family, friends and people that I know, acquaintances. I've had a couple different cousins commit suicide, and suicides are always just unspeakable tragedies. There's just so much pain and sorrow that surrounds those. And I can remember one in particular cousin. It was just such a tragedy because he was such a good guy and such a fun-loving guy. Everyone liked him, and he had such a bright future, and he was young. He was in his early 20s. But he had a longtime girlfriend that broke up with him, and he was just heartbroken, and he was devastated by the pain and the loss, and he just made the rash decision to put a pistol to his head and kill himself. And that is what Satan wants to do. He wants to destroy us. He's seeking to devour and destroy us. And he's taken people and he's turned their thoughts so inward into the temporary, momentary pain. And I'm not minimizing how bad the pain is sometimes, but it's temporary. And the focus is in, and we can't see beyond our obstacles, and we just give up. And as a result, there are people committing suicide or making awful, lifelong, consequential type decisions that are horrible, when if they would just look past their pain and allow others to build them up and encourage them enough to look past their pain and to the future and up to God and up to Jesus, who can bring healing to the situation, then there's such a bright future ahead. There's so many things that they can accomplish and do, and so many more relationships they can be a part of, and such joy and happiness to be had if they can just get past the momentary pain. So don't let the enemy get your focus inward. Make sure you're surrounding yourself by good influences that will lift your chin, lift your eyes up to the horizon, up to God, and also spend time with God and allow that healing process to take place. All right, but let me go ahead and finish up our reading here with verse 22. About this time, Abimelech came with Phicol, his army commander, to visit Abraham. God is obviously with you, helping you in everything you do, Abimelech said. Swear to me in God's name that you will never deceive me, my children, or any of my descendants. I have been loyal to you, so now swear that you will be loyal to me and to this country where you are living as a foreigner. Abraham replied, Yes, I swear to it. Then Abraham complained to Abimelech about a well that Abimelech's servants had taken by force from Abraham's servants. This is the first I've heard of it, Abimelech answered. I have no idea who is responsible. You have never complained about this before. Abraham then gave some of his sheep, goats, and cattle to Abimelech, and they made a treaty. I'm going to just end our chapter right there. Basically, they just make up here, and they form a treaty, and things are good again. But Abimelech comes to Abraham because he is extremely powerful at this point. And Abimelech fears Abraham to a certain degree because he sees Abraham's power and also that God is with him and blessing him. And Abimelech wants in on this blessing. He also doesn't want Abraham to turn on him. And so he wants to initiate a treaty. When he starts initiating this treaty, Abraham reveals that there has been a squabbling over this well, that Abimelech's men have taken this well by force from Abraham's people, even though he built the well. And Abimelech's response is interesting here. He's like, This is the first I've heard of it. Why is this the first time I've heard of it? Why haven't you told me this? Let's make this thing right. And so all this time, Abraham has been dealing with this problem, but because he feared conflict, it wasn't resolved. And as soon as he brought it up, it was taken care of. Abimelech made sure that well was back in Abraham's possession. So this is the last point I want to leave you with. Fear of conflict prevents us from many positive resolutions. Fear of conflict prevents us from many positive resolutions. I oversee our preschool for Renovation Church called Little Town, and so I'm working with teachers on a fair amount. I don't handle day-to-day operation stuff, so I don't have to do a whole lot day-to-day, but I do the hiring, the firing, and do the major stuff like that problem solve, that kind of stuff. Well, I've had a number of different examples where this would be the case, where I would have a teacher come to me just really upset, just heartbroken, ready, almost in tears. And one particular situation was because she didn't get a raise that she was promised. And so I promised her a raise and put in for the raise and assumed that everything went through. But due to a clerical error, for the last couple of months, she had been living with this fact that she hadn't gotten a raise, and she didn't want to bring it up because she felt like maybe she wasn't supposed to get it after all. But she was hurt by it. She was also, it meant less money for her. And then also a resentment grew, and she didn't know what to do with that. And so all these feelings were welling up in her for months. I had no idea. I had no idea she wasn't getting the raise. And the moment she told me about it, I fixed it. I called our accounting and we got it fixed. We back paid her and it was completely resolved. There was no intention on our part to not give her what she was promised. The issue was, though, she was scared of conflict and complaining, and so because she didn't address the issue, she let this resentment build up and this hurt build up, and completely unnecessary. Another situation in the preschool, we had a parent that was being extremely belligerent to our teachers, constantly complaining and really being very rude and even using inappropriate language. Didn't know about it for a long time. This has been going on for months. Finally, I was told about it with teachers being just really upset and not knowing what to do and at their wits' end. I'm like, why are you at your wits' end? Tell me when this first happens because I will deal with it. And I addressed it with the parent and then it didn't get fixed. I addressed it with the parent again and said, this is your last chance. If you're going to be belligerent to my teachers, you're not going to be welcome at this preschool. She kept doing it. We asked her to leave. I mean, it was a problem that was going to be solved because we don't allow that. And so they were experiencing hardships, just like Abraham was experiencing hardships with this well, for no good reason, because they just feared conflict. I think we are really guilty of this as spouses, too. I think this is something that is common in most marriages, where it's little stuff. It's little stuff that bothers us, and then instead of wanting to cause any kind of little temporary fight or hard feelings, we shy away from those, but we let resentment build up because this issue just keeps coming up and it's hurting our feelings, it's bothering us, it's forming resentment, till it becomes this big thing where we either explode at our spouse or even worse, we're turning our hearts away from our spouse because we're letting these seeds of resentment and bitterness grow. It is always better to address issues at the front end, even if there's going to be some hard feelings and even if it's going to be a little bit hard then, it's always better to try to resolve things and have that minor conflict rather than allow it to be a big deal. Don't let fear of conflict turn you. It is wrong to let resentment build in your heart for fear of conflict. It's always wrong to let resentment build in your heart, but to do so and not even give the other person a chance to know that you're hurting or that you're bothered by something, that's incredibly inconsiderate and wrong. And we need to be better as believers to make sure that we are addressing issues. If we can let it roll off us, then let it roll off us. But if we can't let it go, then we have an obligation to go to the person that is offending us or hurting our feelings or causing obstacles for us and sharing what it is. Now, if they refuse to fix it for us, then we can address it a different way. But we've got to give them that opportunity. So a lot of stuff in this chapter 21. I hope you enjoyed it. Please read ahead to chapter 22. It's a very interesting chapter, and we will tackle it next week.